Welcome to this evening's program, Inspirational Moments During an Unprecedented Time, an intergenerational conversation with Holocaust survivor Nathan Leipziger and his granddaughter, Jenn Green. And thank you for joining us. My name is Michelle Fishman, and I'm the Education Manager at the Neuberger Holocaust Education Center. For this digital event, the Neuberger, March of the Living Toronto, and UJA Genesis have proudly partnered to present a timely, unique conversation between Holocaust survivor Nate Leipziger and his granddaughter. In a moment when the world is experiencing much unrest and challenging times, it is crucial that we as a community reflect back on our individual and collective histories to learn from and understand how these pasts can help inform our present and create a better future. Listening to narratives from Holocaust survivors who endured the most difficult of circumstances and how they were able to overcome struggles and adversity provides us with a framework for looking at society today and encourages dialogue and understanding. We are experiencing a moment in history where relationships between loved ones are being tested. Social isolation and distancing ourselves from friends and family is an overwhelming challenge, to say the least. Hearing from Jenn and Nate this evening about how they've been able to stay connected during this unprecedented time is something we can all relate to, as together we search for ways to stay connected to our loved ones. This evening's program will be a conversation moderated by Jenn with Nate, a Holocaust survivor. Together, Jenn and Nate will reflect back on Nate's experiences during the Holocaust while bringing his unique perspective to today's circumstances. And through his story, remind us of the resilience of the human spirit during the most difficult of times. Nathan Leipziger was born in southern Poland in 1928. He survived a ghetto and several concentration camps, including Auschwitz-Birkenau and 2 subcamps of Dachau. Nate and his father were liberated on May 2nd, 1945 by the American Army. He immigrated to Canada in 1948, where he attended high school and eventually obtained a university degree in engineering. A founding member and longtime speaker at the Neuberger Holocaust Education Center, Nate has also been an educator on March of the Living trips to Poland and Israel for 18 years. His memoir, The Way to Freedom, was published in 2015 by the Israeli Foundation. Jenn Green is the granddaughter of Nate Leipziger, an active member of our Jewish community, and a new mom. Jenn has traveled on the March of the Living program 4 times with her grandfather, once as a student and once as a chaperone, and most recently as his survivor liaison. In 2017, Jenn co-founded the Maj for March, raising over $50,000 to date to subsidize the Young Adult March of the Living. And in 2018, Jenn co-chaired the Legacy Gala commemorating 30 years of the March of the Living. Jenn has also worked with Carrying Testimony to preserve Nate's testimony for future generations. Outside of Holocaust education, Jenn also works with the Nanny Angel Network, providing support to families with mothers undergoing cancer treatment. Please welcome Nate and Jenn to the conversation, and please don't forget to type any of your questions you have for Nate and Jenn in the chat box, as we will come back together for an audience Q&A and try to answer your questions. Enjoy this evening's program.
Thank you so much, Michelle. So Zeta, can you tell us a little bit about how you've been keeping busy during the pandemic and what you've been doing to keep some sense of normalcy during this time?
First of all, I'm going to put on my hat so that everybody knows who I am.
Because, yeah, you look more familiar.
No, I'm an incognito. So first of all, yes, you asked me whether we can compare it to a normal time. Well, today is not a normal time. This is unprecedented time in everybody's history. And we cannot rely anymore on the word normal. Maybe it's a new normal. The present dictates what's going to happen in the future. The past will not necessarily determine the future. So we have to look at what's happening today. And how do I cope? I cope relatively well. I have a wonderful support system. But unfortunately, I'm not a typical survivor. Most of the survivors that I know that are still alive are suffering some form of disability, whether they have loss of hearing or loss of sight. And this does not enable them to do what I'm doing by Zooming with family members, by seeing family members, getting together, even like we did in the last 2 weeks when we had a bubble of 7 people, my children, Lisa, Arla, Tzvi, Steve, and Carrie. And we bubbled together for 2 weeks. And we had a marvelous time. And, you know, this now in the next week, we hope to have to bubble with some of our grandchildren as well. So for us, this is a new normal, of course. And but it's a tough time. It's a tough time for everyone, and especially the survivors which have some disabilities. And I've spoken to some, and they're really suffering. And we have to be there for them as a community, call them, visit them, so that they do not feel abandoned as we were once before. So this time, it should not be frightening to them, and we as a community must do something to help them.
Absolutely. Another group that, obviously not even close in the same way, but the children today are affected in how they're living their lives. Their normal isn't what they're experiencing right now. They can't go to school, they can't go to camp. They're not running around with their friends the same way. And I know for you, growing up in Poland with your family was such a special time. And I wanted to know if you'd be able to share a special memory or something from your time when you were young in Poland.
The present situation is not, there's no similarity with what we have experienced in the war or during the Shoah. The only thing that is that the present situation does is that it triggers memories. It triggers memories of the very past. For example, in 1939, when I was 11 years old, when the Nazis marched in, the first thing that they did is they closed the Jewish schools. So now all the Jewish kids were out on the street. Even so, we were on the street, we were free to, still within certain realm, to move around, but we were deprived of one right that we had, is the right to go to school. Our education has stopped. I mean, there were members of our community, like my sister was one of them, who was 3 years older. She was 14 at the time. And at the age of maybe 15, she started to take on young students and teach them whatever they subject. She taught them Latin, she taught them French, and she taught them arithmetics, whatever she could to help the kids, just like the parents today are helping the children to regain their equilibrium by giving them some education. And of course, they're suffering the deprivation of community life, of being with their peers. It's very, very important, and it will have a lasting effect. So it's not a professional opinion, but I feel from an observation that this will definitely have some kind of effect on them, because of the fact that they were isolated and deprived of their peer group.
Zeta, you endured such horrors and difficulties during the Holocaust, from your time in the ghetto and being in several concentration camps, including Auschwitz-Birkenau. Was there ever a time when you felt like giving up? And if so, how did you overcome those emotions?
Once you gave up hope, you are lost. So all of those who survived never gave up hope. That was one of the common elements of survival. And Viktor Frankl wrote a very nice little book called In Search of Meaning, which dealt with the fact that in order to survive, your life had to have meaning. No matter where you were, no matter what the circumstances were, your life had to have meaning, and you had to find meaning in where you are and what's happening. And the meaning that we found was the hope that we will meet with our family members, that we are not going to be alone, that will survive and will be able to restart or continue life as a family. And today, the survivors, as I said before, they're confronted with the problem of isolation, of even not, if it's not physical abandonment, it is a thought of abandonment, that they're going forgotten, that nobody cares for them. And that is a problem. And so those people who I can reach, I tell them not to give up, to continue to live a life for the children, for their grandchildren, for their great children. And this is our victory. Victory over Nazism, Hitler, is our having survived, our getting married, our having children, our having grandchildren, our grandchildren getting married. That's a victory. And the greatest victory is to have the fourth generation of great-grandchildren, which Hitler really did not foresee that will happen, and it's happening. So this is the message that I have to all of my young family members, to keep on going, to live your life to the fullest, and to do whatever you can in order to give more meaning to your life.
Very, very sound advice, and I think is something that everybody can appreciate, not only right now, but all the time. And that's something we're all very grateful to you and all of our Holocaust survivors for inspiring in us. In preparing for tonight's program, we talked about how this point in history has brought up certain emotions and feelings that are reminiscent of your past. Could you share some of those sentiments with us?
Well, the emotions that we have is, we feel isolation, and we feel that possibly we are losing touch with our friends. It's very difficult for those who depend on us for friendship and camaraderie to continue to be with them. And some of us are not technically savvy, and so it's more difficult to get in touch with on Zoom, as we're doing right now. And we are very lucky, those who are able to tune in and become, at least we see our family members in person, and we realize how wonderful and great it is to be able to see you, not be able to touch you, but at least to see you, to hear you, to see your smile, to really know that you are with us. That is a very great, great bonus. So that this pushes the past feelings of anger, of abandonment, of isolation, and of degradation back into our minds, and it brings forward our feelings of being here, making the most of what we can, and being part of the community and helping our community to move forward, whether it is through commemoration or remembering, or just being here to let everybody know that bad times do not continue, that they have an end, for some more than others. And we hope that these bad times will end soon, and we will be able to restore our life. We all suffer not only in Canada, United States, but also in Israel, where our family members are suffering from coronavirus. And every day we hope that they are not affected by it, and that their life are not threatened by it. So these feelings are all there, and we have to deal with them as best we could.
Yeah. That's a great answer. And I can't imagine how difficult it is for all of the survivors, as you've mentioned. And I think it really is incumbent on our generation and everyone who's been so profoundly impacted by these survivors to reach out to the best that we can and help to fulfill that need for those people. So thank you for that reminder and for that positive message.
Just remember that our life and our wonderful way of life that we have in Canada, United States, and all the other Western countries depends on the presence and the existence of Israel. You can never forget about it because you do not remember what it was like when there was no Israel. Those who survived, we know that our life was completely different than what it is today. Today we have ambassadors, Israeli ambassadors in Ottawa and in Washington, and they are here to intervene for us, and if necessary, and I hope that time is not here or will ever become, that if we have to leave, we have where to go. And those in Europe or in other countries, part of the world, in different parts of the world, who do find that their life is impossible to stay where they are, today they have place to go. 73 years ago, there was no place for us to go, and nobody wanted us.
Yeah. I know even when you and I were in Poland a few years ago and we met some kids who had late in their life found out that they were Jewish, and they were sort of saying that what they were starting to experience in Poland, they had it as a matter of not if, but when they would be moving to Israel. So right. The sentiments that they feel, like the fact that they have those feelings today and the fact that they have Israel to go to is just a reminder of how real and how relevant all of these issues remain today, and how we really need to stand up and support Israel from wherever we are in the world, because they keep us safe wherever we are in the world. Zeta, do you have any questions for me?
Yes, the question that I have for young people, for you and younger generation, is you're suffering in unprecedented time. And in addition to the coronavirus epidemic that we are going through, which you have to sort of navigate and have to learn how to live with isolation and separation. And in addition to that, you have today huge anti-Semitic movements. You have to deal with xenophobia, with discrimination. You have to deal with political uncertainties, with the political states which are against Israel, against Jews. How do you manage to do that? What are your fears? What are your hopes, and what are your dreams for the future?
So I can answer that, I guess, in a few ways. First of all, as a granddaughter in general, my concern with the coronavirus, my concern is for everybody, but as someone who's privileged to have 3 wonderful living grandparents, the way that this has been disproportionately affecting your demographic is horrible. And so I think everybody who's in the same position and has people in your generation who love, that in itself is very scary. And particularly as a granddaughter of a survivor, I think my antenna goes up more than some other people's when stuff is happening in the world and people feel their lives are being threatened, things are turning upside down. You always have that feeling in the back of your stomach, like, are they going to blame the Jews? And of course, sure enough, different conspiracy theories, obviously unfounded, have come about that are blaming the Jews for this. And it's just one more way for people to find ways to hate the Jews. And thank God we're living in a time where those specific things, I don't think, are taking merit in society and people aren't listening to them. But the fact that they exist is very, very frightening. And I also think it's really scary that we're living in a time where there's more anti-Semitism and there's more anti-Israel sentiment today than there has been in the last few years. And I think for some reason, people think that it's more okay to be anti-Semitic or anti-Israel than it is to be anti-anything else. And that's a really, really scary thought for now and for the future. When I see anti-Semitic acts happening, or when I hear anti-Semitic words, or on social media, you see a lot of stuff that's anti-Semitic, it gives me comfort to know that today we have community organizations that are standing up against it, and they're saying, you can't say that, look, pointing the finger at people who are saying something and helping to stop it, because we all know that when those things are said and done and it goes unchecked, that's when things can get out of control. And God forbid we don't want anything to get to where it's been in the past in history. And what I would say gives me hope for the future is it's been so heartening watching the support that the Black, Indigenous, and all people of colors, their communities who are facing oppression, have seen such love, support, change, and just everybody rallying around them from outside of their communities. To me, it's so beautiful because it means that people do care about the so-called other, and people aren't only thinking about themselves. And the fact that people in our generation are recognizing that this is very important, and they've done a lot to make this cause very, very visible. So to me, it speaks volume that when people are making noise and when people are saying, this is what's happening to my people, that other people are in fact listening to them. And I hope and I pray that that continues to be how the world is, and that I hope that the next time that the Jews need to speak up and say, listen, like, God forbid we're being attacked, we need everybody else's support. I hope that people will also support us. And I think that I really believe that this next generation has shown something in them, that like the power of social media, being able to come together, the power of positivity and openness and willingness to recognize something in themselves that maybe they didn't realize before was there, to do with hate. And I just hope that this continues, and that people are really working towards everybody being equal and monitoring hate that we see in the world. That's what I would say gives me hope.
Thank you for that answer. Hopefully some of the audience will be able to participate and let us know of their feelings and what their fears and what their hopes and dreams are, so that we know where we're going, because it's a new world. Today when we see that the team Redskins football team is changing its name,
Yeah.
and it's sensitive to the fact that certain words are harmful to others and they're hurtful. So we must be also recognizing that what we do and what we say is very important, because I believe that if you're going to eliminate discrimination has to begin with us. We have to ask ourselves the question as to what is our attitude towards, as you said, the others. And what I think it is the most important aspect of tomorrow is that we have mutual acceptance and the adherence to the law of the country. So if we have those elements, I feel that there's hope for the future and that we will move forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Michelle, I think that you had some questions.
Guys, yes. Thank you so much for already what's been such an insightful conversation. We are going to take some questions from the audience soon. But before doing so, I did have some questions for Jenn and from Nate. But one of the things that I was thinking about as I was listening to your conversation was one of the most inspirational parts of your story, Nate, that I've heard, which is your experience at Liberation. Could you share with us a little bit about your experience at Liberation? I know many of our audience members saw a short video of you prior to tuning into tonight's program, but if you could recount that really amazing and inspirational story, that would be incredible.
Thank you. Thank you. Liberation was my rebirth, and I celebrate May the 2nd as my second birthday, because that's when my life was restored. And it was a victory, but it was a very very sad victory. It was an empty, I call it an empty victory, because at that point, we were able to stop thinking about ourselves and to start thinking about our families. When you're in a concentration camp, your entire day and your entire thoughts are occupied of how do you get through the next hour? How do I get through the next day? Once you're liberated, now you are at the mercy of your life, of your health. Many survivors have died after being liberated. They never tasted liberty. They never tasted, because the life were too far gone. They were either sick or too emaciated that the life could not come back to them. So we were lucky very fortunate to the fact that I had my father with me. And I did write about it in my book about liberation, how wonderful it was, and yet how sad it was. And life is a man is not an island. We need social support. We need families. We need to have a system of support system. When we were liberated, we had nothing. I mean, we were fortunate that the American Army put us into a hospital. And for the next 3 months, I was deathly ill with typhus fever. I had to deal with different parts of the after effects of the typhus fever, and pain and suffering. And then came the journey, the very difficult journey back to Poland to find out who has survived. And I remember being my mother in the railroad cart was the last time that my father, my mother, my sister, and I were together as a family. And this was applied to many survivors who survived, that there was the last moment of being a human being and being a family. Once you left that cart, either you were sent to a gas chamber, or you were sent to a concentration camp. And so this was the last moment of being together. And when I was going to Poland, I was thinking about that very much, because my mother, in the last moments in being in the car, said, whoever survived, go to my mother's neighbor, Mrs. So-and-so. And this was on my main mind, is that I have to go to this neighbor of my mother in order to find out who survived. And I got to the gate, and I couldn't go through the gate. It was like a force was holding me, because I knew that once I go through that gate and I go to the neighbor, I will find out who did not survive. And I didn't know how I'm going to confront that reality. Even so, I thought I was prepared to confront it. I did not feel that I could confront that reality of coming to grips with the fact that nobody survived, that my mother and my sister did not survive. My uncles, my aunts, my cousin did not survive. This was the moment of reality when we went back to Poland. And that was a terrible time. And I couldn't wait to get out of Poland to join my father, who stayed in Germany while I went to Poland, because of circumstances that were not very favorable for him to return to Poland, because he was military age and there was a war still going on. And the Poles were, the Soviets were grabbing anybody who came back from the camp and sending them on to the army. So there was a lot of turmoil. I had difficulty getting out of Poland, because under the Soviet occupation of Poland, there was no mobility. You couldn't just take a train and leave the occupied area. And so I had to smuggle myself out. And this was very, very difficult period, and much trauma, in addition to the fact that you just realize the terrible loss that you sustain. You don't even think about the physical things that the comfort things that you lost. You only think about the love that you've lost, the weapon that you have lost. And that was devastating. It was terrible. And a 17-year-old boy, I still can't understand how I actually went through this and how I had the courage and the fortitude to get on a train and travel back to my father.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's impossible for any of us to conceive how you could possibly have gone through all those things. And with that, I want to actually ask Jenn a question. Just from hearing this tiny part of your grandfather's experience, he's inspired me. I can't even imagine how much he's inspired you over the years as his granddaughter. Can you share with us a little bit about what he's done to help you create your narrative and how he's inspired you with his past and your familial history?
Sure, that's great. And I actually like that you said my narrative, because one thing that we learned that from Nate when we go on the March of the Living and anytime he tells his story is that everything happened because of what he calls an accident of birth. So the reason that my grandfather, that Nate was in the Holocaust, was because he was born Jewish in 1928 in Poland. That's the only reason. He didn't choose to be born. He didn't choose to be born Jewish, not in Poland, nothing. Had he been born somewhere else in the world, had he been born anything other, not anything but Christian, he would not have been in the situation that he was in. So at the time when I first learned that lesson, I was 16, and being a 16-year-old in my position, there was pretty much nothing I had done in my life to deserve the wonderful opportunities that I had. And had I been born in a different place or a different time, even to a different family, I may not have had all the wonderful opportunities that I did. And one of the most important lessons that I learned from my grandfather is that it's our responsibility to stand up for those who are in a situation where maybe because of where they were born, maybe socioeconomical reasons, maybe their race, their religion, their gender identity, their sexual preferences, whatever it is, they need people who have the opportunity to stand up for them to do so. So I feel it's our responsibility, and also it's a privilege that whatever I do in my life, wherever I go, if there's an injustice, that I can stand up against it. If there's some way that I can help, whether it's by getting involved or if I donate money, helping people raise money, whatever it is, it's our responsibility to do so because we can. So we're so lucky to be able to do so. So we must. And not only are we to stand up for people, but as Nate started to talk about before, it goes beyond that. And it's not a matter, a lot of people talk about tolerance, how we need tolerance, but it's not that. My Zetas taught us that we need to take it one step further, and it's about acceptance. And so we talk about acceptance as in, I'll accept you for who you are, as long as it's mutual acceptance. You accept me for who I am. You can practice your religion, your beliefs, all of your practices, and you let me do the same, as long as they don't harm one another, and of course don't interfere with the laws of the land. And if that's the case, then we can all not just live side by side existing, all of us can actually live together, and we'll live in better, safer, stronger, healthier communities. And one other guiding principle that Nate has taught us, and I feel so lucky because I'm so close to Nate, but I know that all of the kids who've traveled with you, other people you've spoken to, are also empowered by your words and have learned from you. And your perseverance and your positivity has provided so much strength to me in my life. And any situation I go into, I know I'm never, like, God forbid, but I'm never going to face anything close to what you've faced in your life. And for those of you who know Nate, for those of you who don't, he is probably one of the most positive, open, welcoming people you will ever meet. And what you saw in history, you saw some of the ugliest deeds that happened, you saw some of the ugliest side of man, and the way that you just approach people, approach life, approach everything with an open hand, an open heart, and that you know that if you work hard and you persevere through things and you see the positive, you can make life great again. And your experience, like having experienced loss, I look to you in how you've dealt with loss through your whole life. And I think other people can too. And through any hardships that I personally have faced, I just look at the situation and I think about what you've been through in your life, and I just know I can tackle it. And when I see ugly things in people in society, I never lose hope in mankind, because I know that there are people who are good. There always will be people who are good, and that you can never hold people responsible for things that other people similar to them or their parents or their history, anybody has done. And that it's on us to make the world a better place and then live our lives to the absolute fullest. And I can promise you that nobody is on the dance floor longer than Nate. Nobody is happier at a life celebration than Nate. And hearing my grandfather speak at my brother's son's bris and then at my daughter's baby naming, there's no greater joy than you can experience listening to what Nate has to say, living those things. So I think it's just, you're absolutely inspiring. There's nothing that I feel I can't do, nothing I feel like anybody can't do. Like, look around at the people you know, anybody can do it. Just have the right attitude, understand that there's going to be something better, and just be positive, be the absolute best you can be, and be kind. So
my reaction is I smile, and the smile means that I kvell. Those who understand what it means is I shep nachas. That's another word that you may not understand, but it is that my heart grows in pride and joy to see my granddaughter to speak so clearly and enunciate everything and to such clear and wonderful thoughts. And I'm very grateful that I have been able to have one iota of influence on her life. Thank you, Jen.
thank you. Thank you.
The last couple minutes of this conversation have just really reflected what we're trying to do here. I know that while I was listening to both of you, my heart was filled and I was smiling. So I think giving people this, way to be able to reflect back on their relationships at a time when physical relationships are so difficult to have and so strained, it's really what this program is all about. And with that being said, my next question for both of you, maybe Nate can start us off, is how has your relationship evolved with Jen throughout the pandemic? Is there any differences or similarities, growth in your relationship?
Well, the relationship was well established beforehand. And the fact that we exuberate love towards each other is sort of a taken. We have, of course, been able to only make contact either through Zoom, like for Shabbat evening when we have together, we light candles together and sing the prayers together. But on other occasions, we see Jen's daughter, Callie Rhonda, who is named after my lovely and beautiful daughter Rhonda, who passed away a year and a half ago. And she is the pride and joy of my life, as are the other 3 great-grandchildren that are in our family now. But with Jen, we communicate practically every day. She calls us, so very wonderful that I am very happy that she calls us every day. And if she can't talk with me, she talks to my wife. And if she talks to my wife, she calls me separately. And so it's and she's always with Callie. And Callie, gives us a kiss and a smile over the TV, over the internet. And what can I say? Life is marvelous, and we hope that it will continue to improve, and that our separation will be short-lived, and we will be able to get together into even a bubble where we can, you don't understand the feeling of being able to clutch somebody and hug them and give them a kiss. How wonderful that what it adds to your well-being and to your heart bank.
That idea of being able to maintain traditions, like you said, on Shabbat, being able to do Zoom and light the candles. It's something that keeps everybody a little bit sane during this time and reminds us that tradition can keep us grounded. What about you, Jenn? How do you feel about your relationship if it's evolved during the pandemic?
Yeah, so as Nate said, we speak pretty much every day, and we've been seeing each other just on distance walks or in a backyard visit. So it's so hard not to just run up to my grandparents and give them a big hug. So it takes a lot of self-discipline, but I really value, and I think probably a lot of people are experiencing this. Like, I really value that we are getting to speak every day. And before the pandemic, we didn't talk every day. And I feel like I'm almost more connected on the day-to-day and the more mundane things about what's going on. And I really feel like, truthfully, I know that when I'm calling, they more want to see my daughter than they want to see me. So I always make sure she's with me. But then, like, I feel like you guys have, for the last, I can't believe it's already 4 months, but like for 4 months, you've seen her every single day. And normally, I think grandparents maybe don't see the evolution, so they don't watch every tooth come in and things like that. So I think in that way, it's actually been quite special, because I do feel that I've always felt so close to you, but on more of the getting to talk to every single day and feeling connected like that, it's very special. And I'm so grateful for that. So I really appreciate that.
One of the side effects of this coronavirus is that one of my son-in-laws and I developed the habit of phoning each other and having a l'chaim together at 5:30 or 6 o'clock. That's a new tradition. So maybe we'll continue this as we go on. So anyway, things have positive things, as I'm sure there are positive things for all of the children that are isolated and that are for first time connecting with their parents at an extended period of time, and their bonding is increasing. So that is the positive part of it. Whether it overcomes the negativity of this situation is a question, but I have no doubt that there are good aspects of what's happening, and that you have to remember is the human development, human nature, that we have the capacity to make the best at the worst time. This is a quality which we possess and which we must cherish, and we must continue to develop, because that is what pushes the civilization forward.
Absolutely. And your sentiments about the positive aspects that do come out of this pandemic, like family closeness, that's definitely heard. And there was comments even from some of our participants who mentioned those similar sentiments. So I think it's definitely something to think about on the day-to-day. When we're reflecting back, we should try and think of some of the positivity and the good things that do come out of these times where we're able to be so close with at least those we live with. We are going to take a few questions from the audience before I ask some final questions to Nate and Jenn. And one of our audience members wanted to know, for Nate, one of our audience members wanted to know what it was like for you for 18 years to go back on the March of the Living and relive your past every time you're on that trip. What are the feelings that come out of that experience for you?
Well, they're very, very, thank you for the question. It's a very mixed situation, because you go through very powerful, very difficult emotions. You go through your memory, bring back memories which are not very easily dealt with, and which weigh on you very, very heavily. And I found that every year that I went back, it didn't come easier. Telling the story was slightly different, because I was at a different stage in my life. And every time I came back, it was more difficult because I was older. My resistance to the influences of the environment which I revisited were changed, and I became more sensitive to what I was seeing, and I became more teary and more emotional, and I had to you know, when you speak to an audience, one of the things that you have to do is you have to suspend your emotions in order to be able to deliver a coherent sentence of how you're feeling. And that is very difficult when you're emotionally affected by the environment in which I am. And so that's the more difficult situation. Why am I doing it? Why am I a masochist or something to punish myself? No, I'm doing it only for you, for young people who are with us, because I feel that we have the opportunity to hear us not for many years more. And we have to give you the message of what is important for us in life, why it is important to remain Jewish, why it is important for the Jewish nation to continue as a nation, as a Jewish nation, which has survived 2,000 years of persecution and expulsion from every single country in the world and harassment from every corner of the world. And we must go on. Why? Because we are unique. We are unique in the fact that we have a long tradition that we can live with, that we can, that sustains us, and that we know will propel us into the future. And we have whether by self-selection or whether by the fact that the world has selected us out, that they didn't want to accept us, that nobody wanted to accept us in the world, we became a group of people who have something to live with for and to live with. And so I think there's value in continuity, there's value in tradition and legacies. And that's what I'm doing it. I'm doing it in order to help you go through life the best way you can.
We're all very grateful for all you do to share those experiences back, because we know how difficult it is to inspire the world that, you know, it should be a better future for everybody. In the chat, we're hearing a lot of praise for you, Nate, a lot of love for you and for Jenn as well for helping share your narrative. And we have a message from Robin, who wants to know what kept you going every day in order to survive in the camp.
Well, you don't really, one of the choices that you had, not very many, one of the choices you had is to live. That's the only choice, and the thought, and your thought processes, and how you could imagine the world tomorrow, and how you could imagine what you're going to do. You had the option, and you could decide that you're not going to get up in the morning and you're going to be clobbered to death on your bunk by the capo because you couldn't get up. Or you could get up and try to live the day as best as you could and go get through it with the hope that you're going to survive. And the survival, the drive to survive is very, very strong. I think it's the greatest, if there's any instinct that human beings have, it is the instinct to survive. And this is what drives you and drove me to get up in the morning when I knew I could hardly move and I could hardly walk, but I got up and I went to work and I survived that day. I was hungry, I was wet, I was cold, I was tired, but everything was secondary to the fact that what is in front of me is the choice to survive. And that was the driving force, the force to survive it. And that was a form of resistance, a resistance against the oppressive forces. They wanted us to give up, to become animals, to just lay down and say, kill me. But we decided, no, we were going to live as long as we can, in spite of the fact that they wanted us dead. This was a form of resistance, which many, many of us experienced and many of us consciously made through everyday life, either in hiding or a concentration camp, because hiding was not easy. The danger of being detected or being found out was imminent every minute of the day, and they lived from minute to minute as well in fear of their lives and a fear of being detected, because not only would they be killed, but also those people who were gracious enough to help them survive would be killed as well. So that puts a big responsibility on them, and it put a big responsibility on us. Especially I had with me my father, so we had each other to support, and I lived for him and he lived for me.
So, Jenn, I have another question for you. It's very admirable, everything you do to help preserve your grandfather's testimony and share his story with future generations. And I know you've been involved with a project called Caring Testimony, which provides a platform for grandchildren and children of Holocaust survivors to help share and preserve their grandparents' or parents' story for future generations. Can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to get involved with this project?
Sure. So the future of Holocaust education, unfortunately, is going to look very, very different for this next generation than it did for our generation and our parents. We were all so privileged to be able to hear firsthand testimonies directly from survivors, to a lot of us in some of the places where these atrocities occurred, and to just have survivors be in our presence and feel their vibes and just get that, all that brings. And so unfortunately, this next generation may not have the same privileges that we did. So the idea behind Caring Testimony is that I did an interview where I sat down with Nate and we talked about his story and we talked about his messages. And the idea is that those will be incorporated into a presentation that I can then bring to another group and I can help tell the story. So it's going to be incumbent on our generation. I think personally, it's my absolute privilege to be able to share your story, Zeta. And that way that testimony will be carried on and people will be able to hear firsthand testimony from my grandfather presented by me to them, hopefully in person very soon. And then even more so than just the story, my grandfather's story and his history being passed on, that all of his messages that are timeless and are important for people to know and understand and take in, that all of those can be shared for generations to come.
I can see just watching your grandfather now when you're speaking about what you're doing to preserve his testimony, how happy he is. You can just see it in his face that he's so inspired by you as his granddaughter, knowing that his story is going to be safe and secured and provide a way, a platform for people in the future to learn about those experiences and those individual narratives. I really see it on your face, Nate. You get such nachas from your granddaughter and from your whole family. And everyone who's watching us with us today also agrees there's just so much praise for all the inspiring messages that people are hearing today. So we are going to shortly wrap up tonight's program. But before we do, I want to ask Nate, you did allude to this a little bit before, but during these challenging, of course, and uncertain times, what is a message of hope and inspiration you would like to leave our participants with today?
Well, as my granddaughter Jennifer said, that that our birth is an accident. It's an accident of birth. We cannot choose who we are born to and what our destiny, what our circumstances are. But the thing that we can change is we can change our destiny. We can change our destiny. The destiny is in our hands, and we can do good, or we can be a bystander. And by being a bystander, you contribute to the demise of the people who are being victimized. And the bystander is not neutral. He is supporting the person that is doing the persecution and doing the discrimination. And if we see xenophobia, or we see anti-Semitism, as we saw in this few weeks in Toronto with this restaurant who said they don't want to serve Zionists, and what kind of effect it had on our community, we know that we can speak up. We can speak up and say, I am not with the person with the bully. I'm with the person who's being suffered. So you have a choice of being a bystander or being an upstander. The term upstander has been brought out by the people facing history and ourselves. And it's a marvelous thing, a marvelous expression, because it tells you exactly what it is. A bystander is a collaborator. If you're an upstander, you are able to express your desire to make the world better, a better place. So my thoughts to the people are, don't be a bystander, be an upstander. Don't go with the crowd. Go with the right, what is right, and not what is wrong. And by just being, there's no such a thing as being neutral. You're either for or against. And I hope that all of my young people today who are listening, and the people who are not, who maybe we can get the message through to them somehow, is that they should not be a bystander. That's the greatest difficulty that we have to overcome.
I think that is such a powerful sentiment in a world today where we are experiencing so much unrest. It's definitely something people need to hear. And going back to that message that Jenn mentioned before, the idea of more than tolerating people and actually accepting people is so, so crucial to our understanding and our ability to move forward as a peaceful and holistic and better society together. Before we officially wrap up tonight's program, I'd like to introduce Ryla Bramer, Director of Strategic Volunteer Engagement with UJA Genesis, to outline some volunteer opportunities that are available for Holocaust survivors to work with Holocaust survivors in our community. That is something that was alluded to in the chat this evening, that people are wondering how they might be able to reach out to Holocaust survivors who don't have family. How can they support them? So hopefully one of these initiatives will be able to provide some more introduction to that.
Thanks, Michelle, and thank you so much, Nate and Jenn. I actually had the privilege of traveling with Nate and with Jenn's brother Jason several years ago on one of the March of the Livings, and really to witness both the power of Nate's story and the education he provides, and how that's really amplified when he's able to do so with one of his family members, and the power in that dialogue. So to be able to witness it differently in a different medium on Zoom and with another grandchild was really quite an honor. And what we'd like to suggest is that there's many ways to continue the dialogue with survivors. Many survivors like Nate are fortunate to have the support of a loving, caring, dedicated family. And with those survivors, there might be an opportunity to continue the dialogue and to pair in conversation. And there are many survivors, like there are many other individuals in the community whose experience right now is amplified by being isolated and by really needing that extra conversation or check-in from community members. And so what we're recommending is, if anybody is interested, there are opportunities through Genesis in partnership with March of the Living and Neuberger to partner people in the community with survivors to really connect in any medium that speaks to you: Zoom, phone calls, one day, hopefully sooner rather than later, in-person coffee dates. And that we can help facilitate that connection, and that we know through these kind of conversations we have with Nate, it will certainly be an eye-opening learning experience and potentially an opportunity to really help someone who is isolated. And so I believe my contact information will be listed at the end of the webinar, and also everyone will receive an email tomorrow as a thank you for participating, and some more details will be there. And my last thought is, should you have a different idea of ways to connect the broader community with the survivor community, the March of the Living community with the survivor community, we're always interested in helping you fulfill that idea. And so please also feel free to reach out with a new idea you might have. Thanks so much for having me and for allowing me to listen.
Thank you, Ryla, for sharing that insightful information. And we will put up a slide in just a minute. So if everybody wants more contact information, they can see the slide at the very end. I just want to let you know, Nate and Jen, that we have people joining us from all across the Americas. We have participants tuning in from also the United States. So the reach is very far with this evening's program. I want to thank you all for joining us for today's insightful discussion. Thank you, Nate and Jen, for bringing new meaning to this important conversation and helping us reflect on our circumstances today. Nate, you have left us inspired and eager to do our part to remember and continue educating on the history of the Holocaust so we can contribute to a brighter tomorrow. Jen, your dedication and commitment to not only sharing your grandfather's experiences, but to ensuring the individual narratives of the Holocaust are carried forth is truly admirable. Thank you both for inspiring and enlightening us this evening. Remember to check out the Neuberger's website, holocaustcenter.com, for more ways to stay engaged with Holocaust education. Throughout these trying times, the Neuberger remains committed to providing meaningful and engaging Holocaust education to our community through our Neuberger at Home digital series, promoting dialogue about our past, present, and future at a time when the world needs this more than ever. Lastly, please consider supporting UJA's Emergency Relief Fund and ensuring our most vulnerable, including Holocaust survivors in need, are taken care of during these difficult times. For more information on this campaign and how you can help support us, visit jewishtoronto.com. Together, we are stronger. Together, we can create a community resilience and build a better, brighter tomorrow. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Nate and Jen. And we are going to just share a screen that has some more information for a brief minute in case anybody would like to see more information and know who to contact at the various institutions that were involved in this evening's panel.
Is that it? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone for participating. Thank you for the questions. They brought a lot of thoughts in my mind, and you stimulated me and you inspired me as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Nate, for those final sentiments. And with that, we thank you all from near and far for joining us this evening in what we hope was a very inspiring evening in an unprecedented time. Thank you very much.